When was your first business? Like, what was the first business that you started, and did that feel or succeed?
Yeah. So when I got out, I took a job as an engineering manager. It
Mhm.
was a really good job, the defense contractor, which gave me a lot of income. I knew that these ideas or the creativity in me was going to require financing.
Mm.
So I was thinking of myself as the bank. So I was going to do this job to try to finance different ideas that I had. So the first idea was to get into real estate. It seemed like everybody that was successful was involved in real estate in one way or another. So I had decided we were going to start wholesaling properties, basically reassigning contracts for a profit without trying to invest too much money in and of yourself, kind of like flipping, but more or less just doing it during the escrow periods. And that strategy, worked pretty well with us. That what we found out is that it wasn't the best way to create large sums of cash. Still, my job was doing much better at that.
Mm.
But what we did find out was that my job got me very great opportunities to get loans for buying large multifamily properties and acquiring properties and doing the Burr method, buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. And that was really a pretty insightful opportunity to see that. The banks really liked that W 2 income. As I was doing this, I was kind of like sharing it with friends and family and talking about how I just really have this knack for, where I had this not, I shouldn't say this knack, I had this interest in business and I was really excited about it. Keeping this media kind of Hollywood thing in the back of my mind,
Mm.
I was like, what if I interviewed other experts like this? And we just did a podcast. People told me I had a deep voice. I was able to go a long time without using the words and like and but and and things like that. How about we create a podcast? So 2018, after some success in real estate, about this time, my wife was starting Marissa's Fit Boutique. We
Mm.
had now started two businesses, and real estate's relatively entrepreneurial because every property is kind of different. You're
Mm.
kind of taking a risk every single time. So people in real estate are usually quite friendly to entrepreneurs, and there's a lot of synchronicity you see between the two industries. I decided I was going to start this podcast and focus on business leadership and entrepreneurship. And the podcast is going to be called Winners, Wallets, and Worldviews. And I was going to interview these different folks all over my West Point network that I think I could get on an interview.
Mm.
And that snowballed into other folks that decided as I would have a guest with some clout, it would grow and grow. And I got invited to speak places. The speaking events turned into people asking to work with me on a consulting basis. And then that consulting opportunity allowed me to get into all sorts of different industries with new beginning businesses, startups, and entrepreneurs. And we have stories on stories about the different strange relationships and exciting things that happened out of that experience. And that's kind of what gave birth to the venture project
Mm.
eventually.
Yeah, and I want to ask next about that. Tell me about ideation of like the venture project, and was that something that you started by yourself, or you had other business partners or investors come in and with you? Tell me about
Yeah.
that journey.
Yeah, great question. As you can tell, you can start to see like probably your listeners are, oh, what the heck's this guy like do? He's talking about a lot of different things. And that's I think exactly what my life struggle has been. And I think that's what a lot of people probably that are creative that are listening to this can relate to is there's this like real estate thing floating around in the air that I was working on and it was
Mm.
making money for me. There's this engineering thing that was floating around in the world and it was making money for me. There's this consulting, there was speaking, there was a podcast, and then there was this dream of trying to create some type of film or movie or all this. And this is all just like floating around in space and nothing really seemed to have any connection between them. And it seemed very difficult to communicate that to other people of what do you do? I don't know. I just do things and hope for the best. Right. And that's kind of
Yeah.
what I was doing for several years. And the venture project was several of these ideas coming together at once. These were all filed away in my cage. And one of them was I wanted an office because I was sick of doing things out of my house. It was difficult meeting with people and it just didn't seem as serious. And I didn't really take people who worked from home as serious as people like had an office. It seemed like it institutionalized it a little more.
Mm.
So I'm like, I want an office. Second thing was I want a studio. If we're going to create media, I need a studio. Right. And then the other thing was, well, I'm buying these properties. It would, and this is during COVID now where the office buildings are just crashing in price because everyone's working from home. We don't know if there's ever going to be people
Yeah.
going back to an office ever again. This is going on. I'm working from home and I'm feeling really lonely and kind of isolated. I'm an extrovert. This is going on. All this is kind of floating around. I started to think about what if we did a co-working space and an incubator? The co-working would create community. I could buy an office and I could sublet out the spaces to people who are also entrepreneurial or startup
Mm.
based. The incubator would allow people to work with me on a consulting basis, which is what I was excited about anyway. And I could do all sorts of different work with wide variety of industries, helping them with, I could kind of opine my creative ideas on their scenario where I don't have to necessarily commit to all these different ideas that float
Mm.
around in my head. It becomes an outlet in a lot of ways. And then I started thinking, well, the podcast or the co-working space should have a podcast studio because I think podcasts are already surpassing radio
Yeah,
listenership.
yeah. Oh,
And it's the
absolutely.
future of really how we're going to communicate. I think everybody should tell their story.